In the heart of the Pacific Ocean lies a mysterious island that has remained isolated from the rest of the world for centuries, bearing witness to an ancient civilization whose traces have long since vanished. We are talking about the renowned Rapa Nui, famous for its massive and enigmatic statues that have sparked extraordinary theories and hypotheses over the years. As we will see, however, these incredible statues on this remote piece of land are not the only mystery. There is much more hidden in the history and artifacts found on this tiny island, surrounded by thousands of kilometers of ocean. Before we embark on this fascinating journey, if you haven't already, we invite you to subscribe to the channel to support our work and ensure you don't miss our new videos. On April 5, 1722, during Easter Sunday, Dutch explorer Jacob Roggeveen first sighted the island of Rapa Nui, which he named Easter Island, in honor of the day of its discovery. Roggeveen had been sent by the Dutch West India Company to find the legendary Terra Australis, but instead, he discovered this remote island in the Pacific. The indigenous people warmly welcomed Roggeveen and his men, offering them food and gifts. However, due to a misunderstanding, a conflict arose, and some of the islanders were killed by the Dutch sailors, who feared an attack.
The natives welcomed us with great warmth. They offered fruit, roots, and poultry. They were eager to trade their goods for our striped linen, which seemed to please them greatly. A conflict erupted when one of our men was attacked as the natives attempted to take his musket. Some of the islanders were killed in the ensuing gunfire.
Roggeveen notes a curious detail in his diary regarding the physical appearance of the inhabitants of this remote island.
The inhabitants of this island displayed a variety of physical traits. Some had blonde or red hair, a surprising characteristic that piqued our curiosity.
How could the inhabitants of a remote island in the Pacific Ocean have physical traits completely different from any nearby population? How did they arrive in such a distant place? This is an intriguing clue that we will revisit later. While Roggeveen described the island's geography and the physical appearance of the Rapa Nui inhabitants in his diaries, it was James Cook, during his visit to the island in 1774, who was the first to tell us about the statues.
On the eastern side, near the sea, they encountered 3 stone platforms, or rather the ruins of them. On each platform, they had erected 4 of those large statues, but all had fallen. All except one had been broken by the fall or otherwise defaced. Mr. Wales measured this one and found it to be 15 feet long and 6 feet wide at the shoulders. Each statue had a large red stone cylinder on its head, perfectly rounded.
Cook was impressed by the size and number of artifacts, and by the advanced techniques the island's inhabitants had used to carve and position them. Some of the larger statues were still standing, and Cook noted that the shadow of one was enough to shelter a group of about 30 people from the sun. From these very first observations, we can draw important conclusions. The first is that the inhabitants of this remote island exhibited very distinctive physical characteristics: blonde or red hair and fair skin, which are certainly not typical of that region. The second point is that the statues described by Cook appear abandoned, with many lying on the ground. Today, we know that Easter Island is home to at least 900 Moai statues, ranging in height from a modest 3 feet to an impressive 33 feet, with some weighing up to 180,000 pounds, 3 times the weight of the megalithic stones at Stonehenge. These colossal figures, once considered just giant heads without bodies, have revealed a surprising truth. In 2017, a team of researchers conducted excavations that uncovered the torsos and lower bodies of the statues, which had been buried in the ground. This discovery highlighted the complexity and craftsmanship of the island's ancient inhabitants, but also raised a fascinating question: why are the statues buried? Studies of the Moai statues have shown that they were not intentionally buried by the island's ancient inhabitants. Instead, the statues were gradually covered by soil due to natural processes of soil deposition, erosion, and other geological and climatic phenomena. Historians estimate that the statues are about 800 years old, but this contradicts the timeline required for their natural burial. Considering the island's climate conditions, the rate of soil accumulation was found to be about 0.02 inches per year. Given that the statues are on average buried to a depth of about 23 feet, if we accept this estimate, it would have taken around 15,000 years for their natural burial. Clearly, these are speculative estimates, but they undeniably raise an intriguing question. Who could have constructed these extraordinary artifacts in such a distant epoch? But this is not the only curious aspect. Another interesting point is that the Moai statues are crafted in a minimalist style, with oversized heads and relatively small bodies. The hands are carved in relief along the sides of the statues, with fingers extending down towards the abdomen. The fingers often meet at the level of the navel, a position that has been interpreted as symbolically significant by scholars. These features are consistent with Polynesian artistic traditions, where the navel is seen as a vital and symbolic center of the body. The long fingers pointing towards the navel could therefore represent a gesture of spiritual power or authority. However, this is not a unique feature of Polynesian culture. Interestingly, if we look to the other side of the world, specifically to Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, we find statues with slender hands depicted close to the body and directed towards the navel. But that's not all. A surprising similarity can also be observed in the petroglyphs found on the back of the Moai statues, which resemble the carvings discovered at Göbekli Tepe. We discussed Göbekli Tepe in a previous video, and as we saw, the site is estimated to be around 12,000 years old. Could these similarities be more than just coincidence? The Moai statues on Easter Island are not the only mysterious artifacts on this small and remote island. If we move to the southwestern part of the island, near Mataveri International Airport, we find the megalithic walls of Vinapú. The walls of Vinapú, constructed with perfectly cut and interlocked stone blocks without the use of mortar, display a level of technical sophistication that could suggest an evolution of construction techniques over time. Some archaeologists believe that this type of construction may represent an advanced stage of the island's culture. When we observe the details of these incredible structures, we cannot help but notice that they are identical to other megalithic walls scattered around the world, such as those at Machu Picchu, Sacsayhuamán, and Ollantaytambo in Peru, or those found in Egypt and even Japan. Despite this incredible similarity, historians and archaeologists maintain that there is no connection between South America and Easter Island, let alone with other parts of the world like Egypt and Japan. However, if we look to Latin America, we find another curious similarity between the Moai statues and strange figures found on the cliffs of Peru, which are attributed to the Chachapoya culture, a lost civilization about which we know very little, but which is believed to predate the Incas by many centuries. In 1864, Father Eugène Hérode, a French missionary, during his visit to Easter Island, noticed for the first time tablets inscribed with peculiar symbols. The missionary asked the local men what these strange inscriptions meant, and discovered that they were called Rongorongo, a Rapa Nui term meaning to speak or to recite. Although these symbols appear to represent an unknown language, they remain undeciphered to this day. Initially, this discovery did not attract the attention of scholars, but when these tablets reached Bishop Tapano Jausen of Tahiti in 1869, he recognized their importance and brought them to the attention of the academic world. Over the years, various researchers have attempted to decipher these strange symbols, and some have noticed a particular similarity to another enigmatic, undeciphered language, one that has been found in another mysterious place, Mohenjo-daro in Pakistan, which is part of one of the world's oldest civilizations, believed by some to be even older than the Sumerians, known as the Indus Valley Civilization. Both languages use pictograms, although the symbols appear different, and in both cases, the exact function of the writing system, whether logographic, phonetic, or mnemonic, remains uncertain. Geologist Robert Schoch, in his analysis of the tablets, attempted to decipher the Rongorongo language and arrived at a surprising conclusion.
Inspired by my wife, Catherine Ulysses, who first noticed the connection, I concluded that the Rongorongo tablets of Easter Island record a significant plasma event in the skies thousands of years ago. I believe this event marked the final end of the last ice age.
According to this hypothesis, each Rongorongo symbol might represent a complex concept or idea, rather than a single word or sound, and some pictograms and signs found on the tablets can be interpreted as symbolic representations. According to this theory, the symbols do not simply describe earthly or everyday elements, but rather extraordinary astronomical events, such as a solar storm. Solar storms, caused by coronal mass ejections and other solar phenomena, can have significant effects on Earth, including climate changes and natural disasters. This interpretation implies that astronomical knowledge of celestial events was of great importance to the culture of Rapa Nui, so much so that they were immortalized in their inscriptions and passed down through the years. According to this theory, around 10,000 BC, during a solar storm, the impact of plasma on Earth would have caused dramatic environmental and geological effects, such as heating and melting of rocks, fires of flammable materials, and the vaporization of bodies and water. These events would have triggered intense rains and subsequent climate warming. Global warming would have eventually caused a rise in sea levels. But not only that, the release of pressure exerted by polar glaciers would have caused earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. This catastrophe would be well documented in ancient petroglyphs found in various parts of the world, and in the Rongorongo texts, which would date back to around 10,000 BC, marking the end of advanced civilizations of that era. Robert Schoch's theory draws on the studies of Anthony Perrott, an authority on plasma phenomena, who studied unstable formations that develop in high-energy electrical discharges, documenting them through their phases. These discharge shapes, known as Perrott instabilities, have been compared with ancient rock art, revealing striking similarities. One of the main examples is the figure of the squatter man, a plasma configuration that appears when a linear electrical discharge is distorted by magnetic fields, creating characteristic shapes. Variations of this figure are found in ancient cultures around the world, suggesting it may have been a global phenomenon observed by ancient peoples. The Rongorongo tablets could therefore be a kind of record of a catastrophic event related to solar plasma or geomagnetic storms. The glyphs studied by Schoch and his wife indeed seem to morph from one form to another, as if they were recording various stages of solar plasma radiation. The hypothesis of a global catastrophe that wiped out advanced civilizations developed in a remote era ties into many other clues that indeed seem to place a disastrous event in that time frame, which disrupted our planet. As we've discussed in other videos on this channel, even mainstream science seems to acknowledge that during that period, a catastrophic event struck Earth, followed by a sudden cooling of the climate and then warming. This change would have caused apocalyptic upheavals that devastated the planet and eventually led to a rise in ocean levels by about 330 feet. This event is narrated in the ancient mythologies of all the world's civilizations, and while science acknowledges the possibility that a terrible upheaval may indeed have occurred during that time frame, historians believe that the myths and traditions referring to this are merely speculations by imaginative researchers. But now, let's return to Rapa Nui, this extremely remote island discovered on an Easter Sunday 300 years ago, and try to answer the questions that remain unresolved in our story. As we have seen, Rapa Nui, which means Great Island in the Polynesian language, contains incredible mysteries within it. We've explored the impressive Moai statues, the inexplicable megalithic walls of Vinapú, and we've analyzed the undecipherable Rongorongo script. In addition to this, we must add the curious accounts recorded by the first men who visited this remote island, where they encountered a population with very diverse characteristics, far removed from the official narrative that claims the island's first inhabitants were Polynesians. The question that now needs answering is, what happened to Rapa Nui? Who were the founders of this ancient civilization, and most importantly, what led them to such a remote and wild corner of the planet? Today, researchers have reconstructed the methods used to create the large statues. As findings show, they were carved directly in the quarries, and once finished, were detached from the rock using wooden planks. According to reconstructions, they were then transported on wooden sleds. Or perhaps, following the indigenous tradition that says the statues walked to their final locations, they were moved by the skillful use of ropes. These ropes, tied around the statue and pulled by men, would cause it to sway, making it move until it reached the designated spot. The limited vegetation and scarcity of natural resources on the island have given rise to theories that this civilization may have self-destructed due to its cultural and social practices. Recent studies have revealed that, in the past, the island was abundantly covered with vegetation and tall palm trees. These palms and shrubs would have been widely used to build small fishing boats and erect the famous Moai statues for religious and ritual purposes, until they became extinct. Some interpret the decline of this civilization as a warning for modern humanity's behavior, which exploits the planet's resources indiscriminately, forgetting that these resources are finite, and that once the ecosystem is compromised, it cannot be repaired. These are certainly fascinating theories that open up deep and relevant reflections. But are we really sure that this is how things happened? Or is this a perspective altered by the awareness and fears of our contemporary world? Having analyzed the enigmas present in this mysterious story, our idea is that Easter Island might tell us another story as well. A story that begins in a remote era when advanced civilizations existed and when the geography of our planet was very different from what it is today. The island may well not have been an island, but could have been connected to the mainland, or it might have been less isolated than its current position suggests. The accounts of those who first set foot in this region confirm that the island was inhabited by a very diverse population, which makes it possible that this was once a place populated by a multi-ethnic civilization that could hardly have developed in such an isolated location from the rest of the world. Or that this island was instead a refuge for those who survived a global catastrophe. The findings of the Vinapú walls, believed to predate the Moai statues, demonstrate ancient knowledge that we find in other parts of the world, and that can hardly be coincidental, but rather appear to be evidence of engineering skills developed before the Great Catastrophe that wiped out the civilization that produced them. The Moai statues and the religious cults that developed later on the island could be the transposition of ancient cults or knowledge, which over the years were forgotten, losing their true purpose or meaning. To this day, it remains a mystery why the statues were placed in those specific locations, which seem to lack a clear logic. According to some theories, the statues might have been used to mark and guard sites where freshwater springs were present, an essential resource that is scarce on the island. Other theories suggest that the statues, most of which face inland, might have had a ritual function aimed at protecting the island's inhabitants. It's clear that whatever their original purpose was, we no longer have any trace of it today. It seems that even the generations before us did not know, as the statues, according to historical accounts, appear to have been abandoned for many years. Our analysis is based on clues found on the island and around the world, clues that seem to tell a shared ancient story, one that is becoming increasingly detailed thanks to new studies. But at this point, we're curious to know your opinion. Who was the ancient people that erected these extraordinary monuments on Rapa Nui? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel to support our work. See you in the next story.